Imagine this. It's the early 1900s in India. A secret society of young revolutionaries is plotting to overthrow the British Raj, not with petitions, but with bombs and bullets. Their actions are about to trigger a political assassination, a sensational trial, and a sentence that will go down in history. So let's dive into the incredible story of the Savarkar brothers and the Nasik Conspiracy Case.
Here's how we're going to break it all down. We'll start at the very beginning, with a secret group called Mitra Mela. Then we'll see how it grew into the much larger Abhinav Bharat Society. After that, we'll get to the main event, the Nasik Conspiracy Case itself. And finally, we'll look at the trial's fallout and what it all meant in the long run. So just take a look at this timeline. It gives you a great bird's-eye view of how fast everything happened. We go from a small, secret society in 1899 to a major assassination in a history-making prison sentence just 12 years later. Things escalated, and they escalated fast. This was a really intense period of revolutionary activity.
Okay, let's get right into it, starting where it all began, with the first seeds of revolution being planted in a city called Nasik. You have to ask, what was going on at the time that made a secret society feel, well, necessary?
Well, the very center of this story, you have two brothers, Vinayak and Ganesh Savarkar. Now, Vinayak was the younger one, but he was really the ideological engine here. And the revolutionary spirit didn't just appear out of nowhere. It was sparked way back in their school days thanks to the fiery nationalist ideas of Bal Gangadhar Tilak, who was famous for demanding Swaraj, or self-rule.
So, to put these ideas into action, in 1899, they started a secret society in Nasik. They called it Mitra Mela, which literally means band of friends. Now, you've got to understand, at a time when most politics involved polite petitions, this was a seriously radical move. Think of it as the very first step, the foundation for something much, much bigger. But, a small band of friends isn't going to overthrow an empire. The vision here was so much bigger than that. Let's see how this small group evolved into a seriously powerful organization with a true nationwide vision.
So in 1904, Mitra Mela gets a major upgrade. It's transformed into the Abhinav Bharat Society, or Young India Society. And this wasn't just a name change. They were getting organized. They actually modeled the structure on a famous Italian revolutionary movement, Giuseppe Mazzini's Young Italy. This was them connecting their fight in India to this global wave of revolutionary thinking.
Now, Vinayak Savarkar's own ideas got a lot sharper when he went to study law in London. He ended up at India House, which was basically a hotbed for Indian revolutionaries. He was translating Mazzini's work to fire up his friends back home, but his biggest contribution was a book he wrote called The Indian War of Independence 1857. He was completely reframing what the British had always called a mutiny, arguing it was actually India's first real war for independence.
And let's be clear, Abhinav Bharat wasn't just some book club for revolutionaries. This was a group focused on action. They were all about practical tactics, especially bomb making. They had members training overseas and bringing that know-how back to India. This helped them build a pretty powerful network with key hubs in Nasik, Pune, and Mumbai, all operating right under the noses of the British.
So you've got a growing secret network. Bomb making. You can probably see where this is going, right? It was setting Abhinav Bharat on a collision course with the British authorities. And that collision was about to create a massive flashpoint.
Which leads us to a really interesting question. I mean, of all the British officials in India, why was the district magistrate of Nasik, a man named A.M.T. Jackson, the one they chose to assassinate? The answer is, well, it's pretty complex.
The irony here is that Jackson wasn't your typical British officer. He was actually a huge admirer of Indian culture, a scholar who had mastered Sanskrit. In fact, he was so respected for his knowledge that local people had given him the nickname Pundit Jackson.
But here's the twist. It was that very connection to the local culture that made him so dangerous to the revolutionaries. Because he was so plugged in, Jackson started to figure out what Abhinav Bharat was up to. And they decided he simply knew too much. So on December 21st, 1909, while he was attending a play being staged in his honor, a young member named Anant Laxman Kanhere shot and killed him.
Well, as you can imagine, the assassination unleashed an immediate and absolutely massive police crackdown. The British authorities moved in to dismantle the entire network, arresting 38 members of the Abhinav Bharat Society. This included Ganesh and eventually Vinayak Savarkar himself.
This crackdown, of course, led to one of the most famous trials of that whole era. It was a trial that would have a huge impact on the revolutionary movement and change the lives of everyone involved forever. Now, even though he was all the way in London, Vinayak Savarkar was singled out as the mastermind, the intellectual leader of the whole thing. He was arrested, brought all the way back to India, and put on trial. In what became known as the Nasik Conspiracy Case, he faced 2 huge charges: helping plan Jackson's murder, and an even bigger one, waging a conspiracy to overthrow the king-emperor. The verdict was absolutely designed to send a shockwave across India. For those 2 charges, Savarkar was sentenced to not just 1, but 2 life terms, to be served back-to-back. 25 years plus another 25 years. That's a staggering total sentence of 50 years in prison. And to really let the gravity of that sink in, think about this number. When he was handed that 50-year sentence in 1911, Vinayak Savarkar was only 28 years old. The court was essentially sentencing him to be locked up until he was 78. He was shipped off to the notorious cellular jail in the Andaman Islands, a place known as Kalapani, or Black Water. That 50-year sentence was meant to be the end of his political life. But after he submitted several mercy petitions to the British government, he was finally released in 1921 after serving about 10 years. Now, after he got out, Savarkar's politics took a really sharp turn. He completely moved away from the world of secret societies and armed rebellion. Instead, he shifted into mainstream politics, and that new path would eventually lead him to become the president of the Hindu Mahasabha from 1937 to 1943. It really seems like his time in prison completely reshaped his strategy.
So, the story of the Nasik Conspiracy Case is so much more than just the story of one revolutionary group. It's a huge turning point. The trial basically dismantled Abhinav Bharat, cutting the head off the revolutionary movement in that part of India. But that leaves us with one last question to think about. Did a crackdown like this really extinguish the fire of revolutionary nationalism for good? Or did it just force that fire to find new and maybe different ways to burn?